Welcome everyone. My name is Vignesh. I'm with Shout for Help with its operations. I have my team member Neela here and joined by Sudha as well. So I would like to introduce you uh, about Shout for Help, the organizer of this webinar. So Shout for Help is a issue resolution platform extending a helping hand during times of crisis for those help seekers contending with trauma or adversity. SFH connects philanthropic experts such as doctors, lawyers, scientists, teachers, NGOs, and the help seekers. Issue categories are in legal, financial, education, and health. SFH is an endeavor to promote familial and communal well-being, creating a happy and peaceful society. SFH platform is safe, confidential, and secure. Please help us spread the word about SFH. You can contact us at the site or on the email info@shoutforhelp.org. So today's webinar will be presented by Ekta Verma and moderated by Mr. Subbarao. Subbarao is an entrepreneur and he's with SFH as an advisor. He's a thought leader in the development of strategic plans and growth marketing strategies for various organizations over the last 2 decades. He has in-depth expertise in supporting business and organizational goals and development. He's a serial entrepreneur and is an advisor for Shout for Help. And I would now request Ms. Sudha to introduce the speaker for today's webinar.
Very good evening. I'm privileged to introduce our speaker, Ms. Ekta Vivek Verma, to our SFH audience who has participated today. Ms. Ekta Vivek Verma is a seasoned professional with 23 years of work experience. She is currently in roles that involve fighting against gender-based violence with focus on domestic abuse and rape culture. She founded the initiatives Invisible Scars and Purna Viram and is the head strategy for Good Universe. Ekta is an executive committee member for Society for Cyberabad Security Council, co-team member for Society for Advancement of Human Endeavor, co-team member for the Thai Women Hyderabad, and co-team member for TEDx Hyderabad. Ekta's work is gender agnostic, and she works closely with state authorities, other NGOs, legal authorities, corporates, schools, colleges, and private citizens to help abuse survivors. Can you please go to the next slide? She has founded Invisible Scars, and this is a support group for survivors of domestic abuse of any age and gender. Through this platform, a supportive environment and ecosystem has been created to encourage individuals to openly discuss their issues without fear of judgment. Thank you so much for Ekta for joining us today. May I request Mr. J to take over the sessions?
Yeah, thank you, Sudha. Yeah, thank you, Vignesh, my colleagues. Thank you very much. And I welcome all the participants who have taken the time to participate in today's afternoon seminar. We at Shout for Help thought this today's webinar topic is very relevant to what is impacting the world at large and to our nation specifically. Domestic violence or domestic abuse is widespread and deep-rooted in India, and its relevance was highlighted prominently during the COVID-19 lockdown over the last 15 months. So I welcome all the participants for participating and then hearing the experts' view from ECTA, understand the definition of domestic violence or domestic abuse to a resolution one can able to really reach out. Today we are going to moderate the session for about 45 minutes. ECTA will address all our common questions that all of us has in our unknown daunting situation. Then we will open up the question answer sessions to all of you. Whoever would like to really raise any questions, please request you to type in the chat box so that we will be able to answer specifically your questions. So without not taking much time, I would like to give a preamble of why we have chosen this topic. As all of us know that as country after country announced lockdowns in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic world over, the home was seen as a refuge. I think some of you or many of you agree that. However, the increasing instances of domestic violence or abuse brings the question, is the home a really safe place for women and children? We need to really, dwell more about it. This alarming increase in domestic violence has even earned a name to it. Very surprisingly, we can call this as a shadow pandemic. We are all experiencing pandemic. Within the pandemic, we are also experiencing a very shadow pandemic, which is unforeseen. That is the reason why Invisible Scars is going to extend their experience, expertise, and observations of the market challenges. At the same time, I recognize studies over the decades have shown a direct link between the times of crisis like these and the interpersonal violence. Being a entrepreneurial journey, I have encountered pandemics provide for an enabling environment of fear and uncertainty that may aggravate diverse forms of violence against women and children. Moreover, economic insecurity, financial instability, and isolation are also some of the factors that contribute to making domestic violence or abuse even more prevalent. Now, COVID-19 is such a kind of a pandemic which has triggered many such insecurities, economic possibilities. So to quote one example, which I have really observed, the Ebola outbreaks in West Africa during the tenure of 2014 to 2020 has shown that various forms of violence are seen in the crisis context. Violence has taken on various forms like human trafficking, child marriages, sexual exploitation and abuse. We have seen that this can negatively impact the female workforce and the female participation in a larger economic progress worldwide, which in turn reduces the ability to earn, mental health challenges, children health challenges, household consumption reduction, which all leads to the economic downtrends to a medium term to a longer term. I think, all of us are going through a very unforeseen situation with this COVID-19 pandemic. I think today it will be a very exciting and a very interesting, important topic that ECTA has gracefully consented to come on board to share her experiences in dealing with people, societies, organizations, state governments, central governments. So without not really giving much more inputs, Ms. Ekta, welcome. Thank you very much for consenting us to be the expert on the topic chosen. We appreciate your availability. Now, like me and on behalf of the entire participants, I would like to really put across some thoughts. Probably you can able to better explain, or reason out so that it will be more interactive in giving the inputs to the participants. First of all, to understand, most of us are unaware of it. What are the different kinds of abuse one may encounter at home?
So a very good evening to everyone who's watching. Thank you to the Shout for Help team, Vignesh, Sudha, Neela, and of course, Mr. Subbarao, who's, we've had interactions before coming on the session also, and they were very, very valuable inputs that you've given as a moderator. And it's so important for the moderator to have these interesting questions which they will pose to us. Now, before I actually answer the question that you've asked me, you mentioned the word shadow pandemic, and I just wanted to, elaborate a little bit on that. So when the lockdown happened last year, we started post the lockdown. When the lockdown happened, everybody was focused on migrant laborers, everybody was focused. But during that period of time, I kept getting distress calls from domestic abuse survivors. Nobody knew what to do, nobody knew where to go. And thankfully, the NCW, which is the National Commission for Women, they put out, they were quick to put out a WhatsApp number for emergency help. We would read headlines like India is seeing the highest in 10 years during the period of the lockdown last year. The highest number of reports and complaints came to NCW. And these are people who have access to a computer or a phone or something like that. We don't even know how many people are impacted by it in areas where they cannot reach out to an organization such as NCW. These are WhatsApp. We are talking about WhatsApp and online complaint systems. So we were reading things like it's not rape, domestic abuse is domestic violence is the biggest crime against women in the country, and this is the highest number of abuse. So I'm hoping today that when we finish this session, by the end of this session, people will have takeaways, because it has not been easy for anybody during this period of time, but it has been more difficult for survivors of domestic abuse because there were more chances where they were stuck. They had that little window of relief during the day where they would get to do things that they wanted to do. But unfortunately, the lockdown prohibited all of that. Now, I'm going to come to the question you asked me. So the most commonly asked question to me is, how do I know it is abuse? Every household has these, altercations. And I'm just going to go to the slide which shows you that how do we know it is abuse and it is not a conflict? Because many people think that if there's no physical violence, then it is not abuse. And we wanted to tell you the difference for you to understand. Before you understand the types of abuse, first understand that if something comes across as a conflict and you are saying that it's a conflict, you may just be minimizing your own problem. So when I look at this slide, it just says that, so I actually know this by heart, so I really don't need the slide probably. Basically, when we are looking at conflict is between two people of equal power in a relationship, right? So when we say equal power, it means that two people are talking as equals when there is a conflict. There may be a viewpoint difference, but there is equal power shared by both the people, which means both of them have the freedom to express their views. However, in an abusive situation, one of the people in that relationship will have more power. That means that they will have the freedom to express their views, while the other person may not actually get that freedom to express their views. And they will have to suppress what they are trying to say, which may be a fair point. So every time that someone is trying to make a point and that person is shut down constantly and one person wields the power could be age, The power could be the relationship. Maybe if it's a parent-child relationship, then the parent would be, the power could be between partners, the one who's economically stronger than the one who's economically weaker. So all of these constitute of the different power dynamics that happen when it is abused. Now, in a conflict situation, you say are arguing over a regular household a thing. Let's say food. So the argument would definitely mean that each of the people would come back and say, okay, I'm really sorry. I think I overstepped my boundaries and I was too loud and probably I shouted at this point of time. It was not right, and we take responsibility for our actions in a conflict. But when there is abuse, all that happens is there is blame. The blame game starts. One person is disrespectful of the other person, and then they start blaming them for something going wrong. So I can give a very simple example of salt being extra in the food, which is a very normal household occurrence, and definitely it could lead to some amount of conflict. But as long as the conflict can be resolved, and as long as there is respect, and as long as one person is not blamed, it should not be that because of salt becoming more in the food, somebody is told that it is, you have been raised in the wrong way, your parents have not taught you anything, where do you come from, don't you have so much sense also to put less salt, every time you put more salt. Now this is all abuse. But when you come back and say, okay, look, today there was too much salt, but I'm very sorry I shouted at you. Please, next time, just be careful. And so it doesn't make, it's just the way you say it, it doesn't make the other person feel bad about themselves. Now, probably the person in an abusive situation would end up crying, suppressing their views. There would be more screaming, leading to an even worse situation than it was to begin with. And when two people are staying together, whether it's two partners, whether it's parents, conflict tends to decrease over a period of time. You tend to understand how the other person thinks, and you start to gauge their reactions, and then you know that, if I do something like this, it is possible that this other person will get annoyed. And then what you do is you kind of decrease, you say, okay, okay, let me adjust a little bit, let this person adjust a little bit, and you try to work out a middle path. Whereas in abusive situations, the likelihood of abuse escalating over time is very, very high. What happens in cases of emotional and verbal abuse a lot of times is it changes into physical violence. The reason I wanted you to know this is because this is the most commonly asked question to me. How do we know it is abuse? And so, if you see that one person is wielding all the power, the one person is disrespectful, they're constantly blaming the other person, there is no resolution, you're constantly running in circles and then hitting that same situation. You hit it once, and then over a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're going back to the same situation, and this is escalating over time,
Yeah.
then you have to know that this is abuse. Now, I am going to go according to what has been given in the Protection of Women for Against Domestic Violence Act 2005.
Yeah.
They have identified four forms of abuse. One is physical abuse, which we know as violence, which is hitting, slapping, kicking, biting, scratching. As you see the picture, there is a belt
Mm.
there in the picture. And unfortunately, today when you Google search for domestic violence, you only see images. We have stereotyped domestic violence as being something which is only intimate partner violence, but that is not the case. Domestic abuse or domestic violence, you will see me using the word violence much lesser. I use abuse a lot. Can happen, across any age group to anyone in a family. So you could be residing, cohabitating with someone. You could be, a relative. You could be a parent. You could be a child. You could be a spouse. Anybody anybody who's living with you in the same house can cause domestic abuse. And physical violence is only one aspect of that abuse. It is not domestic abuse. And the whole reason we think that, oh, if there's a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, then it is not abuse, because that's how it's supposed to be. I have a lot of survivors who come and tell me, but isn't that how it's supposed to be? Once I accept, isn't that how a girl's life is supposed to be, or isn't that how a child is supposed to be, or things like that. We create these stereotypes. So physical abuse will entail any kind of physical violence, hitting, biting, scratching, etc., whatever you can think of, which hurts, physically hurts a person, causes scars, may cause bleeding, may cause injury, any sort of physical violence. Then we have verbal and emotional abuse. And if you remember the description I gave you in the conflict versus abuse, you will see that one person in the picture is talking down the other person. So when things like this, so when abuses are used, so verbal abuse would be, when there are abuse, when you call somebody stupid, when you call someone dumb, when you tell that person that, you're, and you do it repeatedly over a period of time, right, to suppress that person. The idea here is to intimidate or suppress a person through verbal or emotional means, or you tell that person something, and then when they react to that, you say, oh, why you overreacting, a typical technique called gaslighting. All of these form part of emotional abuse, where you intimidate someone, where you humiliate them, where you make fun of them, any of these things that makes a person feel worthless, makes a person feel unhappy, makes a person lose self-esteem, as are all abuse. Economic abuse, as you know. Economic abuse is restricting someone's expenditure, not giving enough money for the upkeep. Typically in Indian households, it's not a rule, but it kind of is the overarching structure, where women usually tend to take care of the home and the children, and the partners and the husbands take care of the outside. And so when economic means of livelihood are not provided, proper food is not provided, which a person can afford, so this is not because of affordability, but enough is not provided, somebody's job is sabotaged, somebody's money is taken away. So I know a lot of very independent working women who would come home and give every rupee of their salary to their husband. They would pay off home loans. So when you're in a partnership, it means that you're in an equal partnership. It means that you should definitely share the economic responsibilities that you are required to share, but it should not be that one person is doing it alone, and one person's having to manage the house, manage the children, manage the job, manage everything together, and yet is deprived of the ability to live a comfortable life. So that is economic abuse. And if you see, I have not used the image of a woman in sexual abuse, because of course marital rape is not given any cognizance as per law. But if you look at sexual abuse, we have horrific numbers of child sexual abuse that happen in the country. And just today I was reading that about 84% of the child abuse happens through people in the family. And so these are horrific numbers. And children, of course, are at the receiving end of sexual abuse. Women are also at the receiving end of sexual abuse when they are asked to perform anything which is degrading to them, or something which they don't like. A sexual relationship must always be that of respect and love. It should not be humiliating or degrading to anyone in the relationship. And when that begins to happen, that is also known as sexual abuse. All of these are defined by the act. I want every one of us to attending the session today to go back and please read the Domestic Violence Act, because that is absolutely necessary for you to know. Thank you, Vignesh, for scrolling up. This is not covered by the law in domestic abuse, but we have begun to see cases of digital abuse. With the increase in the use of digital media, we have seen emails or texts which are abusive in nature, and these are from spouses, these are from siblings, these are from parents. When someone shares some humiliating pictures of you or videos of you, monitors your computer or internet usage. It could also be, we had a case in Bangalore, I think last year, when a husband was streaming all his intimate moments with his wife, online. and this is supposed to be a safe relationship, and then it's no longer safe when you're streaming your intimate moments with your wife online. That is again a form of digital abuse, and I think it's currently we've started taking cognizance of such abuse in the context of verbal and emotional abuse. And this is something which you must know about. Nobody has the right to your internet accounts. Nobody has the right to your banking passwords. Nobody has the right to threaten you through texts or emails or monitor your usage. All of this falls into the purview
Yeah,
of abuse.
yeah. Ekta, very, wonderfully, elusively you have enumerated. Yeah, there are going to be many millions of questions which are going to pop up from the participants in this webinar, as well as from the live streaming that we are on Facebook. I think many questions to be, answered, and then all of us will have, quite a lot of curious questions coming up. Now, taking the definitions that you have defined on the types of different kinds of abuse. Now, what kind of facilities are available for reporting, and as a bystander, what can one do to help the person who is suffering? We know that somebody is suffering, we know either directly or indirectly, and but we do not know how to really handle this. We all know that, okay, there's a national portal, national forum, national helplines, but however said and done, it's a very complex, sensitive issue to really deal with. So how do you advise the participants and the larger crowd at bay to understand what kind of facilities are available for reporting?
Right. So the first thing, Vignesh, I would request you is to go on to slide number 8, which is different ways of getting help. And of course, one of the things that I would like to highlight, and this is especially for abuse survivors, that before you reach out to help, and Vignesh, can you just go to the next slide below this? It says, why document and report abuse? So every lot of people come to me and they are very hesitant to go to any law or any legal for any legal help or to any helplines. They want to talk it out. They want someone to come and threaten their abuser, scare their abuser, teach some sense into the abuser. But please understand that domestic violence, and I say this every time, it is not a family matter. First of all, foremost, it is not a family matter. It is a violation of your human rights.
Yeah.
It is a crime. And for that simple reason alone, you should not hesitate. And see, nobody can come and take revenge on your abuser. Nobody can come and scold your abuser. The most that can be done by helplines is they can counsel the both of you together. They can try and explain in the limited purview of the law. They can try and explain why it is necessary to treat your partner or treat the other person in the relationship in the right way. But because of this, a lot of people hesitate in documenting their abuse. So again, your silence is your abuser's biggest weapon. If you see, it says that. So the more you keep silent, the more your abuser gains courage to do things against you. Right?
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, I think it is very well said. And I think all of the participants and the people who are going through such things have to stand up, and then, this is a respectful life. One has to really stand up to themselves. Yeah, please go ahead.
Correct. It is very critical also for you when you go to speak to any legal authority or a helpline, right? It is important for you to articulate your problem correctly. So I see that a lot of survivors are unable to articulate what they have gone through in a coherent manner. Why that happens is because you remember what has happened today. You've probably forgotten what has happened 5 years back, or you don't remember the smaller incidents, or even if you do, it doesn't occur to you on the spur of the moment. So for you to be able to, not miss out any of the relevant details of your abuse, comprehend the degree of the abuse on yourself, what is the impact? And when you start to document that abuse, you are able to quantify all of this to see what is the solution is need? What is the solution? Do I really need to go to a helpline? Do I need to see the police? Do I need to file for divorce? Is there a way we can work this out? Is this bordering on abuse? Is this conflict? It will give you a lot of clarity when you start to document. Vignesh, we'll just go back to the last slide, please. So I say this to everybody, please document what is happening to you. There is no escape from that. Now we have multiple helpline numbers. 100, as we all know, is the number of the police. As and when a violent incident happens to you and you are at home, the easiest way is to dial 100. Yes, sometimes the police doesn't come on time or they don't respond to you straight away. But please do dial 100 if an incident is happening, because that is one of the ways to document your abuse as well. So if someone is hitting you, it has happened then and there, and you will be able to document this as an incident. If you ever want to plan to file a case or plan to take this forward and separate from that person, all of this will help you. 181 is the number of our one-stop centers. Again, this is a national helpline. And of course, in states like UP, we have 1090, 112. Some states have introduced their own helplines. In Telangana, for example, I think largely in Hyderabad, we have the Bhumika collective number. We have the number of the Bharosa centers. All of these are present there. Then we have the National Commission for Women. Now, the National Commission for Women is a central body. They are located in Delhi. They have a WhatsApp number, they have a website. You should go there, especially if you're an NRI who is facing abuse. You can always log in a case into the online complaint portal of the National Commission for Women. Along with the National Commission of Women, a lot of states, I think there are only 2 states in India who don't have a state women's commission. Telangana used to be one till a year back, but now we also have a state women's commission. And the National Commission for Women website has all this information. So you can go there and you can find out which is your state women's commission. You can reach out to the National Commission of Women. Alongside, you can reach out with your state women commission. And every district has protection officers that are assigned. Yes, the number is far and few, and there are lesser amount of protection officers we have. But please don't hesitate to reach if you're in a smaller district, because the protection officer may just be the person you need help from, right?
Yeah.
So far we've understood 100 and 181, which are 2 numbers that you can reach out to. Then we have the National Commission for Women and State Women Commission. Then almost every state and city has women police stations. We have one in Begumpet. We have one in Lakri Kapul. So almost every police station every city will have women police stations, and you can walk into your closest women's police station. They have a very structured way of filing the case, and they will talk to you about the case, and they will counsel you as required. You can, because now we are all very internet savvy, if you can write directly to any senior police official via email. Everybody's email IDs, Twitter handles are available online. If you are in trouble, don't hesitate to reach out. Always is reach out. The means does not really matter. Write an email, tweet to the senior official, reach out directly. The world has become very small and shrunk due to the internet. Now, if there is a case of child abuse, this is something I want everyone to know. There is a particular family where child abuse is happening, okay, or a child is being impacted by the domestic violence. Sometimes, the parents are going through their own thing, and because of that, the child is being starved, or the child is not being taken care of, or the child is being beaten by one of the parents, or something like this happens. In that scenario, as well as in the scenario that a child is being abused directly, you should reach out to 1098, which is the child line. The child line is very responsive everywhere. Then we have the National Commission, NCPCR, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Then we have child welfare committees in every state. So you can reach out to any 3 bodies, and anywhere you see that a child is being impacted, please get up and take action, because if you know about a child who's being abused, you are equally a party to that crime if you don't report it, because of the simple fact that the child is helpless and may not be able to do it themselves.
Yeah, Ekta, absolutely. This is more, informative and accessible. I think probably even Shout for Help will also list out and then publish the possible different ways of getting help, so that for the incumbents it'll be easy to access. Already there are so many questions are pouring in saying that
Right.
yeah, we all really know there are various means to really now to seek the help, but there are questions which are daunting to
Yes.
answer after our session, saying that how non-responsive the federal and state agencies in reacting to the people. As you rightly said, calling 100 is just a sheer luck of chance. Probably that's what somebody was saying. So yeah, I think still the challenges are going to be innumerable. Though structurally we have put in a kind of framework in place in addressing the domestic abuse slash violence. So
Right.
taking the cue further, because I think a lot of people are waiting to answer
To
their questions
ask their questions.
also.
Yes.
So we will just
Quickly skim through. Okay, sure.
continuing on this. This is very, very informative. Uh, Now, okay, as you have discussed, even during this pandemic, because of the bad relationship between the parents, children also get to suffer. And the children get to suffer very skewedly and very wrongly also.
And that's
So, what should be done if a children in an abusive family uh, is suffering, and how can that be protected?
okay. So, thank you very much for this question. This is one of the most important questions, also because a lot of times, parents stay together for the sake of the children.
Mm,
And this is a
mm,
very common myth we have in our society,
mm,
where we say that, once the child is born, everything will improve.
mm,
And we are talking about placing the onus of a bad relationship on
mm,
a newly born child.
mm,
That is terrible. Also, the way children are impacted. See, a lot of women, and women specifically, reach out saying, well, he doesn't abuse the children, he's very good to the children. But what they forget is that the child is watching the person that they love the most
correct.
getting abused day
Uh,
in and day out. The
abs-
child is entitled to a happy, healthy mother. And
mm,
what the mothers are not realizing is that when you are in an abusive situation, you are neither happy nor are you healthy. And a lot of times, those things directly impact your child.
mm,
You may not be a physically violent mother, you may be someone who's very calm and very loving. But when you are facing abuse yourself, you are yourself not in the best frame of mind.
of
And when that is the case, it becomes very, 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 very difficult for you to do justice to good upbringing of your children. Your child is also watching the way you are treated. So a child thinks, oh, when the child starts to grow up, the child starts to think, oh, my mother's getting treated this way, so
mm,
maybe this is what I should do. And so it
mm,
is the worst thing, because the child becomes the medium through which this cycle gets repeated.
yeah.
So either the child becomes abusive, or the child learns to tolerate abuse, because this is
Mm,
what they've seen one person abusing, they've seen one person tolerating abuse. So either ways, they are not turning out to be regular healthy individuals. They are turning out to be people who will eventually continue that cycle of abuse, either from this side as the abuser or from that side as the survivor. There are long term mental and physical health impacts.
mm,
So mental health of a child is impacted by, the child may undergo depression, they may undergo anxiety, may have poor self esteem when they grow up as an adult. Here
yeah.
I'm talking about when the child is all grown up as an adult.
Yeah.
They may suffer physical health conditions such as diabetes. Stress induces diabetes, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
There could be heart problems, there could be other health issues that a a child who grows up in an abusive environment eventually suffers from. So mental and physical health. But while a child is living with you also, there is an impact, you know. So when you have a small child, like someone who's a preschool child, so that child becomes very crybaby, very whiny, you know, always throwing a tantrum with, there is a lot of this that you see in children who are living in abusive households, because this is a little child who doesn't know what to do. And so this is the method the child uses. Some children you will see stutter a lot, some children you will see are don't sleep properly. This is what happens to the smaller children. For the toddlers or the school going children, they will constantly complain of headaches, their school performance will go down, their discipline at school will go down. All of these things start to take a hit. The child becomes a bully, the child may become violent, you know, the child may not get along with other children. And when this child becomes a teenager, then you start to face major issues, because that is where sexual relationships come in when these are teenagers. So they may, you know, they may indulge in very high risk behavior. So
Yeah.
high risk behavior would be, you know, not understanding what kind of sexual relationships to have, indulging in alcohol and drugs, and you may not even find out about it. I mean, as parents we think, oh, mera bacha to kuch nahi kar raha, you know, my child is very innocent, but we don't really know what kind of company this child is keeping. Of course, this child becomes aggressive, may become a bully, may become someone who's being bullied, may end up with a lot of anxiety, may act out and do things which are not acceptable to you as a parent. So if you are in an abusive relationship, these are the critical reasons that you should not expose your children to that abuse, and you should take them out. And we have so many survivors who've taken out their children and later on realized that the child has imbibed or internalized a lot of the violence.
Yeah, it's very sad, the grown-ups have the issue and they were not able to really resolve between themselves, but exposing the young life to get traumatized. Most of us, our generations are very lucky enough to have very strong parents and, culturally much more reinforced because, yeah, in the olden day times, maybe 30, 40 years ago, I think most of the parents have a single parent working. Nowadays, I think in most of the cases, both the parents do go for work, and then that's kind of order in survival in the modern economic world. So that also leads, because I have seen, most of the overseas nations, people go there, but then they leave the child at a daycare center and pick them up only in the evenings.
I will disagree with you on this a little bit. It is not that we had better parents. Indian parents have known to be abusive.
Oh,
And there are UN reports that say that Indian parents are very, very abusive. We have a very
okay.
emotionally abusive way of bringing it up. But
Uh,
I think that this exposure did not exist when we were children. For example, people like you and me, you know,
mm,
when we were kids, there was not too much of exposure, there was not too much of understanding.
mm,
And if you see any parent of our age repeating that kind of emotional and verbal abuse, or you know, physical abuse, you know that they have also faced it and they think it's the right way to deal with children.
mm,
So I don't completely agree. I think people of our generation never spoke out so much. The
mm.
younger generation is becoming more vocal, they have more means.
Very
I
good.
mean, in our generation, if we wanted to take drugs, I wouldn't know where to get the drugs from. But you know, today is not the same thing. A child knows where to get the drugs from, they know how to go on social media, they know how to do everything that you and me as adults still don't know how to do. So I
Yeah.
think we just kept quiet. We have a culture of silence in our country, unfortunately,
Mm,
and that is all pervasive, not only with domestic
mm.
violence, with everything that we do.
Okay, good. Good that you could able to really put your perspective and experience into it. Now, taking the, one last question before we open the question answer session to the participants. We all have now understood the different kinds of abuse, and your right to really living a peaceful, respectable life. At the same time, the various ways that you can reach out to seek help, and upbringing is very, very essential for the next generation to lead a peaceful society as per our ethics. Now, do you, in your experience and expertise, have seen, do abusers show any potential signs or red flags before they start abusing? And is it possible the abusers to change? It's a very intricate. I'm sorry if my question is compounded into multiple things, and I understand it takes a hell of a lot of time to really assess. And but your experience and your expertise and your observation from the society, particularly being in India, what do you think, Ekta? So, do abusers show any potential warning signs or red flags before they start really behaving wild? And do they ever change?
Okay. So I'm going to answer the first part of the question first,
Yeah.
that do they show red flags?
Yeah.
Um, yes. So the thing that happens is that in Indian societies, initially love marriages,
Mm,
so-called love marriages, now I
mm,
don't know what those love marriages are, but
mm,
were not very acceptable initially, and there was a lot of things. But now that the world is becoming and the country is becoming more global,
mm,
we see that a lot of these marriages are happening where people are choosing their own partners, and I don't like to call them love or arranged. I
mm.
just want to say that they have the ability to choose their own partners.
Yeah.
And definitely, most definitely, an abusive partner does display some red flags.
Mm,
So we have a particular phrase which is called love bombing. And
yes.
love bombing essentially means that when you meet that person,
Mm,
you get taken away. It's so instant. It's just like, it's this is your princess in the on the white horse, or your prince on the white horse, or your knight or your knightess, or whoever it is that is
I see.
taking you away and sweeping you off your feet.
I
And that is one of the biggest red flags, because everything is happening too fast for you to take a rational decision around it. And
mm,
so you get swept up in the moment, and then you go on to realize that, oh my god, what I was swept into may
mm,
not have actually been a very good thing.
mm,
A lot of things, they are not a very potential red flag is when they are not interested in the things that you are interested in. And it's okay to have different likes, but
yeah.
it's not okay to restrict another person from
Mm,
doing something that they like. They don't like to meet your friends, they don't like to interact with your family members, they tend to isolate you. Now see, if you're seeing someone,
mm,
you should not become isolated suddenly. What
yeah.
should happen is that you should probably introduce them over a period of time to your friends and
Mm,
your family members, and then sort of bring them into the fold, rather than you moving out of that fold and going into some other
mm,
zone. They pressure you to, so you may be ready to take the next step in your relationship by making it physical, but if they are pressurizing you to do it and they are emotionally blackmailing you to do it, that is again a very potential red flag. There should be no pressure on these things.
okay.
Consent is very critical in a relationship, and unless and until you're actually consenting, not because there is pressure,
Mm,
that is why, when they tell you things about themselves, right, you should
mm,
observe and listen closely,
okay.
because it may turn out that everything doesn't add up in what they are telling you. So they may tell you something and they may present something else. And if there is any if things are not adding up and they're not the same way that you've been told that they are, and you start to suspect, see, usually your gut tells you if this is the right person or not, but it says that your mind tells you, but your heart refuses to believe. And
Mm,
if at any point you are in that situation where your mind is telling you that there's something wrong, then there is probably something wrong. Please don't hesitate to look it up. See what kind of friends this person has. How
mm,
does this person interact with their friends? How do they interact with the family members? How do they interact with the female family members? You know, what kind of things do they do at home? Are they comfortable doing chores? Are they comfortable? So have those open conversations to ensure that these red flags are taken care of. But largely,
Okay. Mm.
these are the red flags.
Mm.
Now, your second question is, do abusers change?
Yeah.
In India, unfortunately, we don't have too many batterer intervention programs.
Right.
However,
Mm.
abuse could be driven sometimes by having a psychiatric disorder or a psychological disorder.
Mm.
It could also just be a behavioral thing. If the abuser decides that I want to change something and
Mm.
I want to seek help, then of course, over a prolonged period of time, it is definitely possible. I will give an example, a small example. In one of the cases that I dealt with, the gentleman in question was very, very violent, and then his children started to complain about the violence. So after they grew up and they became independent, they started to object to the kind of violence that the father carried out
Mm.
against their mother. And they started reaching out to different places for help. And at the end of all of it, when this gentleman was put through counseling and treatment, they realized that he was suffering from bipolar disorder. And
Mm.
so they took him to a psychiatrist and, of course, sought relevant medication. And so a lot of those violent tendencies reduced. They didn't go away completely, but they reduced. So,
Okay.
definitely, if an abuser themselves is open to seeking help and they themselves recognize that this is something I'm doing which is not okay, then there is definitely help available and they can surely work on the abuse.
Okay. So you mean to say that abuser has to recognize or forced to be recognized that he is not behaving 100%, then the probability of them being accepting their problem and getting it to be resolved could be the chance. But
I don't think there is a resolution, but
mm,
it can definitely see if a person is interested in working on themselves, then nothing can stop them from doing that. It has to be a conscious effort. You
yeah,
can't even force an abuser to go and seek help. That is not even possible.
yeah,
But you can definitely expose them to some literature or written material or videos like this that we have today to tell them that, look, this is what is happening. I'm facing the same thing. This is how I feel. Let's go together. You might probably have to handhold them with you once in a while, and then it's a process. Nothing will happen instantaneously.
yeah. Finally, one very interesting. See, as we have discussed from the beginning, that domestic abuse and violence do tend to happen more to women and children. Maybe as a just closing remark, we would like to also know from you: do men also get face domestic abuse or violence? Have you come across where men suffer in the relationship, being good or being naive or being gentle?
Right. So I'll answer that question by a little bit more detail.
Hmm.
So we live in a patriarchal society, and a
Hmm.
patriarchal society is typically that where men are supposed to hold power,
Hmm.
and women are supposed to be the weaker sex, so to say.
Hmm.
Now, what has happened is that a lot of our relationships have happened within this ambit of patriarchy, and it has definitely been, and that is why this whole pressure on men to earn. No, you have to be the earning member. You are my son, तो तुमको नाम रोशन करना है.
Hmm.
You will take the family name forward, and so on and so forth. All of these implications also come on men, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, what has happened over a period of time is that women have started getting educated.
Hmm.
They are doing higher degrees. They're taking up better jobs. They're getting paid much better. They're more independent. They
Hmm.
voice, whatever they feel like. They say whatever they feel like.
Hmm.
And with when this kind of a person goes into a traditional relationship, it is very difficult because they've not been raised in that environment. They've been
Hmm.
raised to think independently.
Hmm.
And what is happening is that that people are evolving, but relationships are not evolving,
Hmm.
right? So as people evolve, relationships also need to evolve accordingly.
Hmm.
So there are a few households now where women are the earning partner and the man is taking care of the house. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is so that we understand that, yes, it has begun to happen. Men are becoming survivors of domestic abuse. Men are facing domestic abuse. We see a lot of parental abuse, child sexual abuse numbers. Boys face a higher amount of child sexual abuse. And we see that a lot of men are also facing spousal violence.
Mm.
Now, unfortunately, due to the patriarchal structure of our society,
Mhm.
Men don't reach out for help, because the minute a man reaches out, we don't have the relevant laws that will help these men. Men also feel a lot of shame in reaching out, because the minute they reach out, the first thing they're told is, "Arey, you can't control a woman. What kind of a man are you?"
Mm.
And not giving him credit for the fact that he's actually a nice person and he's not trying to control anybody, but he shouldn't have to bear the brunt of that abuse either,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So what we need for our structures, our societal structures, to start to change and evolve as people are evolving. So if women are becoming more educated, if women are getting better jobs, maybe they need to be given that equal space in a household.
Yeah.
So that expectation that they will come home and start doing all the household work, and you sack your maid the very next day because your daughter-in-law is coming home, and you feel that I will make her do all the work, it may not work in this current context. And I also think that a lot of young couples should become independent before they take marriage decisions.
Mm.
It's not fair to take a marriage decision on your parents' money. No, you become financially independent, both of you, and then you set up your household at an equal level. So, to answer your question, men get abused, but men don't speak up. They hesitate to speak up. Men face different challenges. For them, emotional abuse is quite high. They suffer a lot. And there is more ridicule towards men.
Mm.
Women find help, they find empathetic
Mm.
and sympathetic ears both.
Mm.
With men, the likelihood is that they will be made fun of, or but we have men who reach out to us all the
Yeah.
time. I would like to highlight that we have had almost 100 men reach out to us
Mm.
so far for help. We do try and get them whatever help is available
No,
with us.
no, very great work. Very good. Overall, Invisible Scars is helping out to, solve the societal challenges which we are all going through. We are talking about the context of urban populations per se, in large, where we have the systems, means, ability to reach out, ability to have community. And, just to extend this question further, what are the situations in the rural part of India, which is a larger population base in India, such as states like, I do not want to really degrade any states, but there are states where in which, the acceptance of a relationship or abusive nature of a relationship, or as you rightly said, the structure of the society, which is patriarchally driven, how do we really? Is there any kind of possibility that those people who are suffering are able to have a ray of hope to reach out to such small help in recovering?
Okay, so your question is actually broken up into many parts.
Correct.
So the first thing I
Sorry.
would like to answer is Kerala has the highest rate of illiteracy in
Mm.
the country, and
Mm.
Kerala is a matrilineal society,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
Despite which, recently we've had 3 horrific dowry cases in
Mm.
Kerala.
Mm.
So what I want to use your platform first to say and to highlight is that, parents actually paid dowry to get their daughters harassed, abused, and killed. I don't see what is the relevance of paying that money.
Oh.
If you've educated a daughter, uh,
Mm.
her life goal doesn't have to be marriage.
Correct.
She doesn't have to end up marrying anybody. If she's successful and she has a career, she can also stay single.
Correct.
She can choose her life partner. You don't have to have somebody from your caste. And eventually, when you are paying dowry, you are making people, of course, those who are taking dowry are criminals. There is no two ways about it. But if you are also paying, you are also making them greedy. You are showing them that this is something that I have to give you. And instead of spending so much money on dowry and big fat weddings and giving gifts and this, why don't you spend that same money on setting up a business for her or setting up an enterprise for her, making her independent, and let her choose her partner. So if we try to generalize and say, what I was trying to get at is, if we try and generalize and say patriarchal society and only dowry, but then you see this has happened in Kerala and this has brought a lot of shame to the country, because the Dowry Prohibition Act came in 1961 and we are still in 2021 we are still struggling for dowry cases. Recently we had a horrific case in Hyderabad as well, where a lady was murdered for dowry after 15 or 16 years of a marriage. And now, going back to the other parts of your question, rural India. So, see, it is anywhere. I think education is the biggest eye opener. And when I say education, I don't mean literacy. So, I don't mean that you rack up degrees and you will suddenly become very non patriarchal. Education means people who are sensitized, who have the ability to use their education. That is the kind of exposure that needs to be given to the rural sector, because we know that that is the way society functions still, because they don't have I think the rural folks are the most innovative entrepreneurial folks in our country. They find the easiest ways of doing the best things, but they just need people to tell them that just by racking up degrees you don't become successful. You have to sensitize, and we are hoping that there are organizations that are working with rural women to help them. There are people who are making them economically empowered. And I think the crux to all of abuse is that women should not be forced to get married. Marriage shouldn't be the end goal of anybody's life. Most parents just educate their girls so they can get a good spouse, which is the worst thing I've ever heard of. There should be love and respect in a relationship, not this shouldn't be the criteria for marriage, and marriage shouldn't be the end goal, and every girl should be economically empowered, so that even if she is facing a bad relationship, because you cannot do away with personality issues and with behavioral issues and with psychiatric issues. So even if she is facing something, she is good enough to come back and restart her life without any stigma. Because the first thing we tend to do is parents themselves stigmatize their own daughters, and that is what we currently, whether it's our rural context or our urban context, we exactly function in the same way.
Yeah, thank you, Ekta. I think, it's a very elusively you have portrayed and then patiently answered my questions. So they might be very, excuse us for asking, what has come to our mind at this juncture. And there are already so many questions which are waiting from the participants to be answered. So I will quickly move on to the questions which are raised by the participants as we speak. And we will also try to cover if there are any further questions which are coming up. Okay? Right. The first question which has come up was how can I get NCW in Calcutta to respond to my emails for help? I have written to them twice in this month, but I think looks like there's no response. And somebody was writing, I hopefully think that it is a case of domestic and financial abuse. She or he could able to really classify that it is both domestic and financial abuse. So how do we help out her NCW in Calcutta response or reach out?
Please go on to the NCW website. There is no NCW in Calcutta. NCW is based in Delhi. NCW has an online complaint portal. Please complain to them. They will most likely transfer your case to your West Bengal State Women's Commission. Like I said, there is NCW and there are State Women Commissions. And you can reach out to the State Women's Commission also directly online. If they are not responding to your emails, please give them a call. They all have office numbers. Give them a call during the office timings. NCW though does have a complaint portal and they are very responsive. So it's not fair to say that they are not responsive. They are definitely responsive. I have written out, I think 3 days back, we had a horrific case in Bihar where the girl was cut up on her entire body, and we reached out and they immediately responded to us. They immediately reached out to the police. So NCW is Delhi based, that's National Commission for Women, and you have your State Women's Commission. You can reach out to both parallelly. Just go to the NCW website and they will
Yeah.
guide, and you will find the resource to do that.
Yeah, hopefully, I think the participant's question must have been answered in a elaborative manner. However, if you are not able to really find the response any effective, please do get back to us at Shout for Help. Probably we'll coordinate with ACTA and then the relevant operations, and then get to it that you will get an attention to. Okay. Hopefully, I think this has answered your question. The another question which has come in, the process to file a complaint with police where the domestic abuse is in the form of verbal and emotional abuse, which is not visible as you classified earlier. Once you complain, how one should move out from the house along with the kids. Very sad to say that.
Correct. So there are two parts to this question. First is, what is the process to file a complaint?
Yeah.
So if you are facing domestic violence and it is verbal and emotional in nature, like I said, please document your case yourself. When you go to the police, you should have complete information on how many incidences of abuse take place, what are the kind of abuse that takes place. When you go to the police, they will initiate a process of counseling. They will counsel you, they will call your spouse, they will counsel him, and then probably they will get both of you together, him or her, and then they will counsel both of you together. Now, when you want to move out of the house with the children, right? Please, what I think I have highlighted this many times is, what we forget is the children belong to the father as well as the mother. The child is not yours alone. So it is not fair for you to say that I want to move out with the children. You can definitely move out, but there should be some consent or some counseling should have happened or some intervention should have happened where you are required, if the children are small, to keep the children with you, and the father can come on a regular visit. And the best way to approach, if you're not comfortable with this, is to file for a child custody case, but these cases take a lot of time, right? But you cannot deprive a parent of their right to meet a child, because biologically the child is theirs as well, right? And it is not, we are not, I think this is a mistake that women make all the time, is that you want the children all to your own because you think that you are responsible for their upkeep. That is not the case. Sometimes children choose to go to the father. So please find a middle path where the children are also allowed to meet the father. I don't think that, and if you think the children are not safe in that relationship, and I'm saying again, if you feel that the children are not safe, the father is violent towards the children, or the father is doing something to harm the children, please reach out to the child helpline, ask them for help, ask them to make a report for you. There are a lot of cases where fathers don't provide for the children financially. They start hitting the children when they are drunk or things like that. If any of that is happening, then yes, you should take the children away from that environment and you should definitely report it. So whether you go to the police in that case, or you can go to the helpline also. You can reach out to the Sakhi Center helpline. 181 would be a good way to start, and then they will guide you on how you can file the report.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Probably, I think this must give a direction for them to really affirmatively think so and take the action. Hopefully, I think, yeah, you should try out these aspects, what ACTA has said. And still you want to really reach out, please reach out to Shout for Help, and then together with Invisible Scars and Shout for Help will, navigate you to get a resolution to you. Okay, the next question comes from a participant. Why the courts or police not take any legal action against the defaulters in this pandemic tenure, even if they are not stopping the domestic violence acts? I think probably what I understand, they must have complained to the police, or they must have already registered a kind of written note to the court. However, said and done, I think the participant is still facing an issue, and looks like police or either the court are not taking any action, legal action.
So the first thing that I will do is I will probably make assumptions around what this situation could have been. So when women go to a police station, sometimes they think that giving an application itself is a case, and that a case has to be. But what they don't understand is that for the police to take action, you have to actually file an FIR. And the process of filing an FIR, there is, so when you go to a police station to report any kind of abuse, when you go there, they counsel you, right? Because that is the process that they follow. So they will call you for counseling. They might call your family members. They might call your spouse, whoever is required. There will be 3-4 sessions of counseling. And then if it is decided that, you know, things are still not really working out, or things are not being clarified, or they see these people have a lot of experience, police officers, and they know when someone is going to continue to be abusive. And if you have, so I'm assuming that you have not filed an FIR. If you have filed an FIR, you should be getting the required help. We have women who get help all the time, so we cannot say that help is not reaching. But what in your particular case would have happened, we don't know. As far as the courts are concerned, yes, the courts were not functioning during the lockdown. I think last year the lockdown was a little difficult. Nobody understood what to do. Your lawyer should kind of, you should reach out to a good lawyer, and whoever your lawyer is, they should kind of take this forward in the court. The courts have started having virtual sittings. Cases in Delhi are being heard. If cases in Telangana are not being heard, you can reach out to us. We can guide you on how you know, you can take your case forward. But it's not a combination that the police and the court are not taking care. Enough cases are getting closed, and enough cases are being handled by the police. And what I think you should do is, you should probably reach out to us, and we can help you evaluate what is the reason that you've not got help.
Yeah.
Just ensure that you have an FIR in place. That
Yeah.
is a first information report. That is when action will happen. And I've told you the several ways in which you
Yeah.
can report.
Correct. Thank you. So please get back to us if still your problem is not solved or addressed to both Shout for Help and Invisible Scars can look into it. Okay. The one more very challenging question is, in spite of having the Domestic Violence Act, there are so many cases which are increasing. You would call it as a failure of the act by itself for the institutional arrangements, or pandemic could be one trigger further accelerating still.
So see, it is a combination of all three. It is a societal failure. It is a system failure, and it is failure on part of individuals as well, right? So when I say it is a societal failure, I just discussed 10 minutes back that we prepare our daughters to get married only. We tell her that no matter what you achieve in life, if you're not married, if you don't have children, you have zero success, right? And she grows up believing that marriage is the end all and be all of her situation. And when that particular marriage doesn't work out, she starts to flounder, and you start to flounder because in your mind you have also not prepared yourself for anything else. So we have conditioned ourselves to believe that marriage is the end goal of everything. And I want that to start changing a little bit. You know, today as a parent, I am really not bothered if my children choose to get married or not. And I think that's a huge step, because you know, I have not come from that kind of a background. I was also prepared for marriage all the time. You know, we groom the child by saying that, oh, you know, I've got saris for you, see, I've kept so much jewelry for you, see, you know, we are preparing for your marriage from now itself. We are middle class people. From now itself, if we start collecting, by the time you get married, we will have enough savings for you. You don't spend on the girl child's education because you think that if you spend on her education, what will you spend on a marriage? So I think we are self-sabotaging, self-conditioning people. We have conditioned ourselves to believe this is what is right, and this is one of the primary causes that we don't empower someone. See, I may be in a bad relationship, but what is important is my ability to get out of that bad relationship and
Mm,
not continue it,
mm,
or my ability to tell my abuser that, look, if you don't change yourself, if you don't go for some serious intervention, then probably we will not be able to work out things. But I need to be empowered to be able to say that as well, right?
mm,
That is the first thing. Then, of
mm,
course, system failure. I won't say system failure. What I will say is lack of facilities.
mm.
Uh, Overall, our society is a patriarchal society. So the way abuse is understood is also still the same as it was understood 50 years back. We still have a domestic violence protection act of 2005. We are in 2021. The act needs to be relooked. A few more sections need to be added. Maybe even possibly some gender neutrality needs to be brought into
Mm.
the act, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, we are still looking at an act which is of 2005. We haven't worked on, and I'm sure there are recommendations on what changes should have been made. That is for the legal people to do. But as a system, we've not been able to implement it. There are very, very low budgets for gender based violence issues. Um, we still pressurize. So now what we do is we pressurize our boys to be extremely masculine.
Mm,
We tell them that if you don't earn, you're a failure. If you don't take care of your parents in old age, you're a failure. If you don't do the family business, you're a failure. I mean, I know of someone who did not educate his son too much because he thought, who will take over my business? If this fellow gets too educated, he will go out and he will study. So when we look at all of these things in the larger picture, we realize that, oh, this is not even the right way. A child should be given the independence, and a child might stay back due to monetary issues, or the child might be conditioned to believe that this is the way I'm supposed to live. But where is the true independence in that? And so I think it's a mix of everything. There is a bit of a system failure. There is a bit of a failure of our thought process and the way we function. So I think all together it forms for a bad situation. There is so much more needed to be done. We at Invisible Scars are trying a lot of new things to be able to, get it to people. We are trying to be gender neutral. If you see, whenever I spoke about domestic violence itself, I did not use any gender terms.
Yeah.
So we are trying to make those little changes also. And I think everyone needs to start accepting that if relationships are evolving, society has to, if people are evolving, relationships have to evolve, and society has to evolve at the same speed.
So I think that's absolutely correct. I think all of us has to introspect in understanding ourselves, and then changing societies will change. The change in people changes the societies. So rightly said, Ekta. And then lastly, I think in a brief while, what IPC has for domestic abuse in India? Is there any specific IPC?
Yes. For domestic violence, we have 498A,
I
which
see.
is wrongly interpreted as a dowry section.
Uh,
498A talks about cruelty against women. And
mm,
I request everybody listening to this session today, please go and do some Google search.
mm,
All of this information and everything that is used, to help survivors in terms of legal glossary, legal, sections is available on the internet. 498A distinctly points out to cruelty against women,
mm,
and it is the section for domestic violence. Dowry is just one part of that issue, where domestic violence is perpetrated due to not giving dowry or not giving sufficient dowry.
oh,
So don't let things mislead you. Of course, if there are other criminal activities, then other sections of CRPC will apply.
mm.
But largely for domestic violence, we have 498.
Okay, probably I think it is a cue to straight away go and then refer to it more in depth and then
Right,
understand.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I think for the wanting of time, we will, we request the participants to post further questions anymore. So we will answer if you have any further questions. Please post on Shout for Help. We will get back to you. And before we just say thank you for all of you for taking time out and then participating in this today's webinar. I think it is of informative in nature and supportive in your current circumstances if anybody is going through. And our endeavor of Shout for Help and Invisible Scars is to reach out and see how we can play a role to resolve or help you out. So I thank Ekta Verma for giving her experience, expertise, and information in a such elaborative manner. Definitely, I understand this particular topic is a sensitive in nature. Some of you might be, still not able to really, ask us. So you can able to refer to our web presence on, Shout for Help and as well as invisiblescars.in to get more in-depth information related to the subject that we have discussed today. And I thank all my team members at Shout for Help, Vignesh, Sudha, Neelaveni, and all of you. Ekta, once again, thank you so very much for consulting us today and then, being part of the expert committee member. And all of the participants, we thank you for showing the interest in Shout for Help. Please do stay in touch. We would like to really bring out such furthermore webinar sessions in the coming months. Please do post us what we can able to address in the coming months. And thank you very much. Thank you, Ekta. Thank you. And thank you one and all.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope that even if our session today can help one person, even if it is just one person, I think our target for the day is achieved because it's so important that somebody takes away something from the session. So
thank you all.
So
thank you very much. Thank you, Vignesh. Thank you, Sudha and Neelaveni. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Subbarao. Thank you so much.
Especially, and Vignesh and Neela.
Thank you, Subbarao sir.